So we're talking about Tantra trainings. Can you recall a moment where everything changed for you and you knew that things weren't going to be the same again afterwards?
Mm, yes. There were multiple of these moments in different trainings because I dipped my toe into smaller, like 1 day events, weekenders, and then big events. But they were often quite similar, and that was how my heart was actually really closed and how painful it is to live with a heart that's quite closed. And in these trainings, I would have heart opening moments and I could not go back to live my life the way I did before because I realized how my heart was closed and how life actually is supposed to feel like when our hearts are open. And to be a bit more precise, it's seeing other women being or other participants being really able to just be open and hug someone, to laugh really loud and really, like kind of contagiously, just laughing, being silly, dancing, crying, being really honest with each other. Like all of these things are for me an expression of living with an open heart, where I can meet someone with love and curiosity and warmth and warmth. And for me, when I arrived at trainings, I would feel like, oh God, almost like this really tight suit on that keeps me really contracted and like, ugh. And yeah, I could not go back living from that place of being so kind of caught in my own ways.
Yeah, and this wearing this suit, this contraction, yeah, that's what's big for me as well. And I think this suit and contraction was also really layered with a lot of social conditioning about sex, about relationship, connections, intimacy. And so for me, a big moment of the change was just that haha moment of like, wow, how much conditioning am I bringing into this situation within my own perspective of my identity as a relating, intimate human being?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
In what way?
You being a relating, intimate human being, the conditioning. What's that conditioning?
Yeah, well, I think everyone, or humans, we love connection. We are part of being in tribes, pack animals who like to connect and be with each other. It really helps calm our nervous system, and I think it really forms the connection that keeps humanity turning and not disintegrating. And I think there's a certain element of conditioning where we have been told messages that, especially for men, that we can be like the lone wolf, that we can be living by ourselves, and that we can be, it's all you.
Independent.
Yeah, and it comes a lot from individualism, which is great. I'm not knocking that, but there are a lot of downsides to this individualistic approach to living, which means that if we're not that familiar with connecting with other people that might not be directly related to our intimate partner, then it seems a little bit like, ooh, what does this mean? What signals am I throwing out? Then there's an element of like shame attached to it as well, of like, is this just the entry to being super promiscuous? Is this, and this idea of not wanting to reach out and have these connections, yeah, it's based on an element of fear of rejection as well, and also this idea that it's just me and I'm doing this by myself and I'm, the lone wolf type thing.
So, how did this realization that you were living from this place of being a lone wolf as an identity and seeing and recognizing that there is a fear of letting go of this identity of being the lone wolf and actually connecting to other humans, women, men, in this more open, giving love more freely, giving touch more freely? How did that change your life? in the
Well,
sense that I can't go back to how this was before.
yeah, the first thing of like acknowledging it. So the first thing that I kind of sat with for a while is actually being quite triggered by it. And then thinking, why was I being so triggered? It was also then coming from an element of kind of envy and jealousy of like, oh, I actually really wouldn't, I would actually like to have that connection. And then sitting deeper with that emotion of like the wanting it was like, well, what's stopping me? What's the challenge that I need to overcome? And getting to the root of that was the fear of being rejected, and also the lack of confidence of speaking my desires for human connection. So when I got to the bottom of that, of being like, wow, if I want that connection, I need to do something about it. I then applied that more with my life all around, of like feeling that I had a need, and how am I going to get that need met? And if I'm not actively doing something to go about that, then it's not going to be met. And I find with a lot of men who have that need for connection and that need of love and intimacy, if they're not going out and actively seeking it and being fulfilled, then they look for other things. And this is where pornography comes into it, really. But that's, I think that's another conversation. We got another question on the go?
Yes. If you could transport our listeners to experience just one profound moment from our tantric journey, which would you choose and why? One intimate moment. Profound moment.
For me, it's going to be in a room full of people doing energy activation. And we were doing it with ourselves, with me and you, as a partnered work. And it was a chakra breathing, Kundalini activation. I can't remember the exact thing, with Shashi.
It was Shashi
In Holland, in the Tantra Festival, Awaken as Love Holland. And there were like, I don't know, 60 people in the room, let's just say that, 30 pairs. And we were all just like activating our chakras through quite intense breathing.
Yeah, breathing and shaking.
And one person was doing the breathing and the other person was the witnesser and the observer. And I remember having distinctly different experiences as being the witnesser, and the other one being the doer, I suppose, the energy. And it was very introspective, but at the same time, very connecting with the whole room. And the energy was magnified because so many people are on different journeys. And it portrayed how powerful energy can be when it's all synchronized in one space. And it also just showed this huge spectrum that could be experienced by my own experience, by then your experience, and then by everyone else's experience. And they were all unified, but also distinctly individual. And I was just like, wow, what an amazing experience.
So you felt like, wow, this is this energy thing that everyone's like talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like really feeling it.
Yeah, I think this was the first time when I had these like, shakes of
Yeah.
like allowing the energy to flow freely.
Yeah.
And coming from a person who's relatively like composed,
Yeah.
contained, and like really enjoying the benefits of that because it's quite grounding as a Taurus. Activating this energy and being like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. This feels electric.
Yeah.
And I think this electricity is a beautiful way of realizing the power of the chi and life force energy and Kundalini and all this beautiful stuff that then is innate within you that you can apply to other moments of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
And how about you? What about you in terms of these moments within Tantra retreats?
There are so many. I feel it's like all puzzle pieces that are always like after a week, or sometimes I've even done 5-week trainings, right? I feel it's always like this redirection that makes sure that I'm on the right path. And there are many things that are this kind of redirection. I know when I was like in my beginning of my 20s, like festivals were like that. It's like boom, so opening. And so for me, I love when I can find some bits in myself that were kind of like shadow work, that were like hidden. And when that gets alchemized, there's so much energy. So if I get to feel something that I've been suppressing for a really long time, afterwards, I'm like so much lighter and there's so much more energy. And I remember in my first Awaken as Love, for example, I was doing a shadow work about women. I like the prompt was, what triggers you? And I chose something that really triggers me and my mother, which is like being unpredictably angry. And I remember this whole day being like, this whole exercise being like, I hate when women are like that. I hate angry women. I hate it when they just lash out and like have this entitlement. And then the shadow work was to like bring it back to myself, being like, I am an angry woman. I'm fucking angry. And it panned out on that day that we had like an emotional release exercise with Afka, and and I was terrified. I was terrified to express this anger in a physical way rather than just talking about it. I was really anxious before. I was like, I don't want to do this. And then Afka, she was demoing the emotional release with so much like fun and juice. She was like a lion. She was angry, but she's had such a good time doing it, right? And it was such a good transmission. It's something you can't teach someone. You have to be close to someone else who's already accessed that type of expression. And I was doing that just like after demo. I was like, like really, it was quite sexy actually for me. And afterwards, I was so turned on. I'm not someone who's like running around with loads of sexual energy in the sense of like being really horny and having a lot of desire. But after that anger release, instead of crying for days, like what I was so afraid of, I was really sexually turned on. And it was so cool because it was literally like all this fear and all this like suppressed anger just returned into life force, just returned into like sexual energy. And it was so liberating and it felt so good.
Yeah, because energy is energy and it just manages to take form with different qualities.
Yeah.
And that's that transmuting the energy or just kind of like changing the trajectory of, if it's going towards frustration and anger, what can we do to like shift that trajectory to turn into another form
activation
of activation
and
aliveness and bliss.
Yeah. That's what they call alchemy.
And I think this leads on nicely to the next question of being in Tantra retreats or Tantra trainings. What moment has been for you that stood out as a moment of healing and healing something that previously you might have thought was beyond repair?
Well, I've received tons of healing. That's why I always come back.
Yes.
Because I want more. Yeah. I think one big thing for me was with men, actually. I've done a lot of trainings, women only, and I'm so grateful for them because they got me up to a point where I was like really able to go into mixed trainings. I needed that at that time, that focus just on myself and being in female only spaces. And what was really transformative for me is what I love about conscious community. And there's obviously not everything's perfect, but what I love is that everyone comes together to look at their shit, but to be there for each other during that. So we're not doing it alone. And so if a participant in a tantric training is a trigger, there is a really high chance that this person will take that time to listen to me when I go to them. And I'm like, hey, every time you do that, I feel this. And I've just been observing that in myself and blah, blah, blah. And then they get to to be part of my healing.
Mm.
And I think that's really how healing is meant to be. We're not meant to do this by ourselves in a room. We are constantly mirrors for each other, for our wounds, of our greatness. And if we meet with conscious community, there's kind of like an unwritten agreement on like, yeah, we're here for each other's evolution. So my point is, with men, I remember being with two men in like a sharing situation. That was also at an Awakeness Love, actually, in Poland. And we were just sharing, like it was kind of like a shamanic day. I think we were about to go out into nature, and I can't even remember the prompt. But what I remember is that I felt like, and who knows if it's true, I felt that both these men were attracted to me.
Mm.
And sitting there with them in this circle, I felt so uncomfortably pulled out of my center. I felt it was like energy, kind of like as if their desire would just like pull on me physically.
Mm.
And it was really uncomfortable, and it really kind of made me act in a different way. I felt like, it's hard to describe, but off center.
Mm.
And I felt guilty because there's also a part of me that enjoys receiving attention. And I talked about this with another woman in the training, right? Another participant. I'm like, oh, I find it really hard to put my boundaries, and energetically and also physically. And, I'm a people pleaser and blah, blah, blah. And then she was like, yeah, boundaries. But what do you actually want from them?
Mm.
What do you want from these men? And I was like, well, and that's kind of hard to admit, because you're like really honest with yourself. I'm like, I enjoy the attention. I enjoy attention. And it felt kind of like, like immature or whatever. But that was the truth. And so it got me to actually talk to one of them. I can't remember if I talked to both of them, but to one of them being like, hey, I feel this, and I just want to, between us, like that there's energy. And I just want to be really clear and transparent. What I desire from you is attention. That's all.
Mm.
Because there's always this idea often for us women, this idea that if we are like flirty, or if we're like, have that like play with someone, that there's an expectation of like more.
That it leads somewhere.
Yeah, like that you kind of owe them now.
Yeah.
Because in a way, I felt like that. I felt like guilty in the sense of like, oh, this person has given me so much attention. Now I owe them. Because I got my need met, which is like being witnessed and being looked at. And now I owe them whatever they desire.
Mm-hmm.
And that was super life-changing. And I still know how warm, and it kind of makes me tear up a bit, like just remembering this man when I told him how he was just so nice about it. He was like, yeah, it's okay. Like it basically took out all the contraction in my body, all the fear, all the guilt, all this like I've done something wrong, or I now need to somehow establish a boundary because there is like this, there's this expectation now from this person. And I think being in a training like that, it really gives us this time and opportunity to reflect on the unconscious patterns that we're running all day, every day.
Yeah.
It's like creating this space to become aware what's actually like, what program are we running? And when we get aware of that program, that's the only time we can actually change it. So for me to like realize I don't need to leave my center. I don't owe anyone something. And I can claim my desire that I enjoy attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I think it's interesting, and I like the term, and the term's used a lot, but it really fits well into this context, is there's definitely a narrative that gets played in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say narrative, I think of stories, and stories have particular roles. They have people play a particular role. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in your mind, you had a situation where these men in the narrative that was in your mind were playing a particular role. Now, when someone deviates from that role and shows you that the typical person, like a man, can actually play a different part in the narrative, then it shifts the narrative in a different direction and reruns the program of what it can be. And so I think, yeah, does that sound good?
Yeah, totally. It interrupts a pattern.
Yeah.
It gives you, it's kind of reality check of like, oh, I've
Yes.
been walking around this earth believing this to be true, and then suddenly you're like, oh shit, that's not true. It's not true that everyone wants X for me. It's not
Yeah.
true that if I do this, I owe that. Yeah.
And it's really beautiful to have that conversation because you then were able to see what his intentions were. And perhaps his intentions was just to give you attention. And then you have a situation where both people are consensually getting their needs met and everyone wins.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Yeah, for me, healing, I think, and it wasn't necessarily beyond repair, but it was more alivening the recognition that healing was necessary. And that was really towards the feminine energy within me, the feminine side of me, because Tantra festivals, there's a lot of Shakti energy. There's a lot of movement of, yeah, that kind of energy.
What does that mean? Sensuality or
Sexuality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sensuality.
Okay.
Yeah. And
play, I guess.
and
as
play,
well. Yeah.
joyful, creative, also a bit wild, also a bit sporadic.
Yeah, also a bit emotional.
Also a bit emotional. So it's a lot of Shakti energy of all of its beauty, really. And stepping into these spaces, it really made me realize that how much my masculine energy had been, kind of suppressing my feminine energy, or not allowing my feminine energy to be what it needed to be able to heal parts of me that were still weighing me down. And this comes from suppressing emotions or feelings or heartache from previous relationships, and going into the operating system of, oh, that's done now. I'm not going to feel that anymore. That's history. Whereas within the Tantra training, tapping more into my feminine energy, I was allowed to give space for this emotional expression and realizing the role that my masculine had to play in creating the safer space for my feminine energy to feel seen, appreciated, and heard. And so it wasn't necessarily like, oh, now I'm going to promote more feminine energy and suppress my masculine energy. It was actually refining my masculine energy to hold more space for my feminine energy to be appreciated, seen, and heard.
Wow.
And that was a really big learning for me. And yeah, it really helped process a lot of dormant emotions that had been suppressed. And yeah, it showed me that despite it needing work and attention, that it was actually really achievable as well. It wasn't like massive changes were necessary. It was more just slight refinements of the balance between me.
I'm so curious. What changed in your everyday life from this healing? Is it like how you think of this ex-lover, ex-partner, or is it like how memories, like how you feel when memories come up? Like what has changed?
It's more of, well, the interesting thing about it is the feelings, they dissipated. So they were seen, heard, and I brought it up to the forefront, and doing so allowed them to melt away more. Right. So it really, within that container created by my masculine for my feminine to express herself, it allowed the suppressed feelings to be processed, which then removed a lot of the charge from them. So it allowed me to tap back into the past and come at it from a very like peaceful way. And this is really important because these are experiences that happen in the past, but these experiences also reoccur and happen all over the time. And so it's more in the present and in the future being like, okay, this is quite emotional, instead of just taking control of it and being very like focused and very like objective and like very rational. It's like, how can I allow these emotions to run freely with Shakti energy and be seen by my Shiva masculine energy to witness the whole polarity between the two inside me. And doing this is, yeah, it's really beautiful, and it also is able to transform energy really quickly. You know, in the past, perhaps something might linger for ages and you're holding a grudge for like 2 weeks over about something that happened, and you're like, wow, this is bogging me down so much. Whereas if you just give it or if I just give it the time that it needs, I realize that actually this energy can move through me pretty quick.
Yeah.
It doesn't want to just like be lingering. It just wants to be seen, recognized, and then be like, all right, thanks, I've done my bit, later.
Yeah. Yeah, resistance just is such an energy drain, right? I totally relate with that because yeah, I think that's one really big thing that changed for me in these years of doing somatic work and tantric work. That emotions just move through quicker. And then eventually I can even allow bigger emotion to move through in the same time. Not that it's like a race, but I also still have the same battle each time there's an emotion. I'm like, my default is, oh, what you're crying about that, or oh, why is that so important? Oh, that shouldn't bother you. Oh, why do you feel like that? You know, like my first impulse is to devalidate my experience, and then I get to be compassionate and like validate myself and be like, no, this is a big deal for you in this moment, even though rationally it might not be, doesn't matter. And then allowing it, and then actually being free of it, which is, yeah, if I don't validate and I just suppress and be like, but rationally, yeah, don't just let it go. It comes back and back
And it comes back with a vengeance as well. Yeah, because that's also the difficult thing when it comes back and you don't know where it's come back from. And you can't, that's my rational brain thinking of like, if I know why something has happened and I can then deal with it in the moment, I'm much more like, okay, this has happened because of this and now I have to deal with it. However, if something's, let's just say 4 months down the line and all of a sudden you get like a rush of a particular emotion and you have no idea where it's come from or why it's resurfaced, but it's resurfaced, and I'm like confused and I'm like, how do I deal with this? Because this is, where is this coming from? And stuff like that. And it makes me on a journey of over analyzing.
Yeah, it's just a real energy sucker.
Big drain.
Yeah.
Next question.
What's the most radical way our relationship transformed after we both committed to this path?
I love how you asked that question.
Oh, yes. I love this question because I think Neo-Tantra and personal growth and all of these kind of events and intimacy, conscious intimacy events, they're really all about healing our relational wins so that we get to have epic relationships. So yeah, what would you say as the answer to this question?
So the first thing that came to my mind, and I'll say that, is we're experiencing the experience together.
Yeah.
And this is important, and I think I've talked about it before, but it's the idea of we are individuals, but we're also in relationship. And we are experiencing this growth, this individual growth and relationship growth together. And that presents challenges, but it also presents a huge opportunity to expand together. And I think that's super important. And I think that's why we have a solid relationship.
Yeah.
radical ways that it's also impacted our relationship is knowing that because we are both understanding what's happening, like we're going to this event and we're understanding the significance of the event through the commitment of love and compassion to each other, and also through the energy that we create through intimacy, we are combining our or interweaving ourselves together in both of our healing paths.
Mm-hmm.
So me being with you and understanding what we're experiencing and creating this sexual energy together, when stuff comes up, I am also part of your healing process because we're in this together, and the energy that we're creating it together. And vice versa, when I'm bringing up stuff and it's really impactful, you are intrinsically involved in that as well. And this offers a lot of support, and it offers the container of love to be able to transform the stickiness that might happen. And it must be said as well that sometimes, because we're together and we're cultivating this love and doing personal growth at the same time, that sometimes you take on the role that triggers. And so it's like, it's can be quite challenging, but at the same time, it's realizing that while you are stepping into the role of the trigger,
What did I trigger you with? Give me some juice.
well, it's not necessarily like you're doing something, but you are the personification of a wound. So, for example, if we're in a Tantra festival and someone comes and interacts with you and I don't like the feeling between it, you are essentially triggering to me my past wounds of being abandoned or being cheated on and stuff like this. So it's not necessarily your fault because you're not doing anything wrong. You're just being a nice person, whereas that's then activating all that stuff in me. So you're the trigger, but at the same time, once I have the courage to talk about it, you are also part of the healing process.
Yeah, I love that example.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, yeah. Every man and every woman that we interact with every person that we interact with, right? We can do relational healing for ourselves that will have us evolve to having better relationships romantically or with friends, right? So that's something I really love about this space. So just for all the singles out there, you don't have to go with your intimate partner to have this relational healing at all. That's the whole point of going there, is like to remove the blocks so that you get to have just an epic relationships that are really fulfilling. And I remember one trigger specifically with you where you were in a training and you felt actually really sad and lonely in that training. And I saw you not in your usual like confidence and like kind of almost being in control, because you're so like in this like calm confidence. You're just like, everything's okay. I'm not worried, you know. I'm not worried that people don't like me, or I'm not worried that I said the wrong thing, or like things that I usually worry about. Like that's not really where you are usually going. So I saw you kind of in a way soft, and I guess this is I don't want to say the term, but in a classic like cliche, like kind of weak, because usually you're like in this strong position where you're like the rock, right? And so many women, including myself, want their people, like their partners, to be emotionally available. But then when their partners are actually, their male partners, talking about a heterosexual relationship, are in an emotional phase, most women, including myself, feel pretty uncomfortable with that. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, you know, just to hold that. And because you're in community, it's not just between you two. It's like, it's a whole different dynamic. It's kind of like emulating for a week, being in a tribe. There's all these different characters and like dynamics going on, and I got to just hold that discomfort in myself that you're going through a process. And I think if I wouldn't have been in a festival like or Tantra training like that with you, I wouldn't have been as conscious of my pattern of not being comfortable with giving you space to just feel yourself. And that's what I mean with like, we become more aware of the programs we run, and we have the chance to overcome them if we're going to trainings like that. Yeah, that was really cool.
And do you think that's helped our relationship?
Yeah, I think it helped me to be less codependent on you being super grounded and constantly available for my emotional support.
Yeah.
You know? So it's kind of like just being aware, like, oh, every time Patrick has his own process about something, I feel uncomfortable because I really just want him to be available to look after me, 24/7. And that's obviously, a very mature place to relate from.
Yeah.
It's a child place to relate from, and we don't really have epic relationships if two children are going out with each other, so we kind of need to allow ourselves to step into the adult who's like, oh yeah, how can I take care of myself in this moment where I feel uncomfortable about my partner not being my emotional rock.
Yeah, because I think that's a really interesting point, and yeah, that needs to be addressed, because I've spoken to a lot of men about this and talking about vulnerability and tapping in and tapping into their emotions, and there is that narrative of men holding space for their partner and their emotions. And also I've heard this recently from people in families about holding space for the whole family. And then when talking to them about, okay, where's the space for you to in your emotions? And the reply that I hear quite a lot is, well, if I fall apart, who's gonna pick up the pieces? Who's gonna hold space for me because I feel like I need to hold space for everyone. And yeah, there's an element of trappedness of like, okay, it's unfair essentially because it's one directional. Whereas, and then the knee-jerk reaction is like, okay, I can't necessarily tap into this emotionality because things are just going to fall apart. Myself, well, I feel like I want to fall apart, but then like, what is the consequences for my family and my partner? So I'm not going to fall apart, so I'm going to push it down.
Yeah.
And then that just manifests in a lot of problems.
And if I remember my own moments of repressing my emotions, it triggers the fuck out of me then seeing someone else not suppressing them. Yeah. So it also makes complete sense. In your example, I could feel it in my own body of like, if I would be that man who's holding everything together, if my kid cries, I'm like, oh God.
Yeah.
Again. Because if I don't get to cry, I get annoyed.
Yeah.
With other people taking up that space. And then you have both, right? You're holding everything together, and you have a potentially like a partner or a wife being like, why are you not more empathetic with all of this?
Yeah.
Why are you not more empathetic that Timmy is crying about this thing at school and the cat died, and you're like, well, just no capacity.
Yeah, I don't have the capacity.
And I feel then there's a resentment as well of like, everyone gets to like lose their shit about minor things, and as the man, you're like kind of so conditioned to not do that at all.
Yeah, well, you're playing the role. You're playing the role essentially, and so ideally, the solution would be for men to feel like they are in a safer space when their partner can hold that energy for them. So it does require a little bit of the feminine person in the relationship to step into that space holder.
The healthy masculine.
If you
want to use those terms, or just saying like being
able to be with it.
To just let the other person have some emotions for a moment,
And it can just be calm. because if the nervous system regulate other people's nervous system regulate your nervous system. So if you're in a situation where like, okay, I'm letting go, I'm feeling into it, and the person's just there, not getting triggered by it or not getting emotional by it, and just able to be like, okay, yeah, I'm there. And so that's a great way, because that's can happen day in and day out.
Yeah.
But then if that's not available, that's why these Tantra retreats or trainings are really beautiful for men to go to, because it does allow that space for them to tap into their emotions and be seen, because there are people, trained people holding the space, and there's also the community holding the space. And if it's not Tantra events, then it's men's groups, and that's why men's groups are just so important these days, because men can go and tap into their vulnerability, and other men will be there and be like, you do what you need to do.
Do you feel I've upgraded in my way of just allowing and just being when you are going through like a wobble or like a huff or something?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're definitely much more aware, and you're definitely less triggered by it.
Yeah.
And I feel that you're also much more aware that often you have more space to be emotional than me.
Yeah.
But then let's also say that because it's not an equality thing, it's an equity thing.
Yeah.
Because you are more emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
And
not 50-50. It's
not
just like
50-50.
what each person needs.
What each person needs. So in our relationship, you do need more space for that emotionality, and I'm more than happy to fill that space holding thing. But then at the same time, because I also like, it makes me feel like a man.
Yeah.
You know, there's something nourishing about it, that like, you know, if I give you a hug and you're like, just say, and you like sometimes say, just tell me everything's gonna be okay, and I'm like, everything's gonna be okay.
It's so nice.
And you're like, oh, and you melt into it. I'm like,
yeah, it's like real surrender for me. I'm like, and I hold on to you also like really strongly, and like soften my whole body, and like put my head in your chest, and I'm just like, oh,
because it just activates my like protector service. It just basically, man, it just like hyping arousal of my king archetype, and I'm like, yes, the kingdom is safe. Do as you wish.
Oh, it made me a bit teary.
Yeah, and also, so I think that's something to really consider.
Okay, so for the people who've never been to a tantric training, there is not only crying and looking at your shit, and that's the beauty. It's a celebration of life, right? So the opposite of that is not happy, it's alive. So we do include all of the tears and the anger and the because it gets us to feel more liberated and greater. And what I really love is there's so much dancing, jumping, laughing, giggles. And that's why when you see a photo of a tantric training, usually everyone looks so bloody beautiful.
The before and afters are
yes,
amazing.
People look so beautiful, every single
Radiant.
Participant, because they've liberated so much gunk from their
gunk liberators.
Gunk liberators. And yeah, I just want to mention that because we've delved into that.
Yeah, we went deep with it, and I love them. And don't get me wrong, there's always a little bit of like, oh, here we go again. A little bit of anticipation, a little bit of like
fear for me,
a little bit of jitters.
Yeah.
But when I'm in the space, I'm just like, I feel like, it's gonna sound super cheesy, but there's a home feeling to it. And often, because people who attend are looking for something or perhaps a little bit alternative, and this is maybe not met in normal society, let's just say that. And when people get into the space, including myself, I'm like, oh wow, I'm full of a room full of people who are coming at it from the same place, and it feels deeply nourishing. And then we have all the activities, the structures, and it's like personal growth, and I'm like, yay, this feels great. Sometimes it feels really challenging, but then it's a process, and when you get through it, you just feel so alive.
And if you've been, what I love as well is like, it's a space where it's safe to take down your masks,
Yeah.
to be really yourself, to
Mm.
show the parts that you're ashamed about, to show the parts that you're really good at, you know, like your greatness and your shadows, like everything is invited. And then if you're taking off that mask and other people have already seen the real you, it's such a fertile soil for really good friendships.
Yeah.
And that's this home feeling, or like, yeah, I'm meant to be here because I meet people who I can really vibe with. But also the beginning of this friendship, we've already stripped down.
Yeah.
We've already showed each other like our tender hearts, and that's so endearing. So the armoring, if someone really like, if you get to see someone in a vulnerable place and you know, hug each other, and it's a really bonding experience to go through a training.
Yeah. And what I love as well is like how it's kind of like a playground of like, okay, I have an intention. I need to work on being more assertive. I'm going to go to this training and I'm going to tap into this intention and I'm going to see what comes up. I'm going to figure out why I'm not being as assertive. I'm going to practice being assertive and I'm going to then feel into what it feels like and experience and embody this assertiveness. And then I'm going to leave and I'm going to try and be more assertive. So it's like, have my intention, go figure out all the thing that's preventing me from being that, embodying what it feels like to be that, and then leaving and being like, okay, how am I going to be more assertive? And yeah, it really comes naturally, and that involves a little bit of integration, and the integration can be a bit tough because you're readjusting to life outside of the training. But a lot of people talk about how transformational it is in terms of working through intentions and then applying that into their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
And I think that's just amazing.
Boundaries is a big one for me. I went again and again and again. And yeah, it's also so cool to eventually see the progress.
Yeah.
You know, because like the first time I've been in a sex positive kind of event, like it was so triggering that I felt just fear in my body. I was just crying because it was too much. And then last year we've been at a Tantra festival and I've just had so much joy and pleasure in my body. And I was like, had this moment of realization of like, oh my God, that's only like 4 years ago that I would be in the same situation and I would be so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really fun when that happens.
Yeah, they are a great accelerator.
Shall we close this?
Oh, let's close it. What's this hand holder? That's a new closing style. I like that. Let's close this.
Let's close this. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, 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 bye.